Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Gentlemen Before Cinephiles. It is ALFRED August. Hi. I tried to do a Hitchcock impression, and then I realized I don't quite know what he said.
I know what he sounds like when dubbed in Japanese for reasons that.
Oh my god, that was so funny. Evelyn,
The cure for insomnia comes in capsule form. It needs to be taken internally. I'm sorry.
internally, but Evelyn found this Hitchcock video game.
Yeah,
It's in Japan.
It's Japan exclusive. All it is like a sliding tile puzzle game with pictures of Hitchcock stuff as like the reward for solving the puzzle. And like you get these cinematics that are like from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, but they're dubbed in Japanese.
And it's amazing. It's remarkable, and Evelyn and I are going to eventually do a review for her channel.
Oh God.
I am here with some special guests, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves before we dive into Marnie. Who wants to go first?
I was already talking, so I guess I'll finish that loop. I'm Evelyn. I'm usually on here in some form or another as the sound person or a guest or whatever, but I'm back for Alfred August because Hitchcock is like my jam.
Yeah. And I'm trying to force Evelyn to write her Hitchcock book.
You have a book idea?
I have a paper idea.
She has a paper idea that she already wrote the paper on, and she's going to turn it into a book.
Well, you need to turn it into a book or at least try to get it published
Yeah.
in paper anyway.
Felicity, Evelyn, and I's friendship has turned into aggressive support.
Yeah.
Where we will make... You tell us that you want something, we will make you get it. We're not going to help you get it. We're going to make you
We're going to force you to realize your full potential.
I'm a pusher, Katie.
I'm a pusher. I push people.
You're going to live your best life whether you want to or not.
Yeah, straight up. Who are you?
Well, I think I'm Felicity today,
Yeah.
but I was a goldfish yesterday.
Felicity was
so.
the fact checker back in the day when Charlie was on the podcast.
I was the fact checker that was rarely needed, yes. Because they knew their facts.
Oh my god, that was a good recovery. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so today we're just going to dive into Marnie. Who wants to give a Marnie synopsis?
I'll let someone else do that because I'm
I
a little
elect Erynn
foggy.
to do that.
Okay, great. Marnie is about a damaged woman who is constantly switching identities and constantly on the run from something. And the movie deals very heavily in psychology, like as all Hitchcock movies do. And this is something we're going to talk about in great detail. But this was the film where Hitchcock he was very what's the word? He was very horrible to Tippi Hedren.
Kind of a dick?
He was kind of a dick. I had a brain fart there.
Very aggressive behavior.
He was very aggressive towards Tippi
Hitchcock,
Hedren. He was
more
very
like Hitch
abusive.
Dick, am I right?
Oh. But yeah, so Hitchcock was just awful to Tippi Hedren and super abusive towards her on set. And so we're going to talk about that in addition to the actual film itself. So going into the film itself, the film is very important to Hitchcock's oeuvre because it is a direct response to how the spy films kind of I guess appropriated Hitchcock's style from early films like North by Northwest. We are thinking about doing a series more in depth this coming December, actually, with spy movies. So keep an eye out on that. But Evelyn, you talk about this relationship a lot with Hitchcock in the spy film, which we will be talking more in depth later this year. Would you want to go into that a little bit, Evelyn?
So yeah, we kind of talked, I think, in our last episode about how Hitchcock has kind of had this like proto-spy film template that he was working on since like the 30s with like the 39 Steps, which was the 39 Steps was everything that Sabotage was going to become, or became Sabotage, and then Saboteur, and then Saboteur became North by Northwest, and North by Northwest became pretty much the template that all the early James Bond films came out of, and then so many things copied James Bond, and there's this whole line of secession that with spy films that goes directly back to Hitchcock, and of course, like with the James Bond films being a little more genre film, like Hitchcock was Hitchcock was a little salty that they kind of aped his style without really, I guess, respecting where it came from.
They're almost accrediting him. They didn't give him credit for the style that they were appropriating.
Yeah, they directly ripped him off. And then also, that's part of why this film is super connected. Marnie is super connected to that battle because Hitchcock directly tries to, I guess, take power away from the spy film to, the success to that is up for debate. But, just even pulling Sean Connery for the film was a huge step in that. It's because Sean Connery, he's coming out of James Bond at this point.
And Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Let's not forget that.
Zardoz. Or is that what it is called?
Oh, yeah,
What's it called?
That's after that, Zardoz.
Oh, really? It is?
Yeah.
Oof. And then our favorite movie of all time, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the real thing. But, so in this discussion of Marnie, some traits in Marnie that kind of mirror the spy film. You have the character Marnie in and of herself, who is, stealing from all of these employers, taking on different personas, and going throughout her life in this kind of pseudo James Bond-esque type of way. And so what he's trying to do is not only take power away from the spy film, but he's trying to redefine the spy film genre in and of itself. But what were you going to say, Evelyn?
Oh my god, it's just like Atomic Blonde.
Oh my god,
my
don't even
Lord.
bring up Atomic Blonde here.
Oh my god.
But,
Can I say something about Atomic Blonde real fast?
Say something real slow.
I really like. I'm just kidding. So I really like the song "Killer Queen" by Queen, and I
good song.
have always wanted to see that
She's a bop.
see that song be put in like a movie trailer about like a woman spy type of deal, and I'm so mad that it was used for one of the Atomic Blonde trailers. I'm just like, why couldn't it have been like a better like female spy movie?
This is like a frustrate. This is okay. I don't know why we're talking. I may or may not cut this out, but I don't even know why they decided to go with "Gasoline" by David Bowie for the full thing. Because then the whole time I'm just thinking about how much more I want to be watching *Inglourious Basterds*. You know what I mean? I'm not like, oh wow, Marnie, good one, no, you know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah.
Just so you know, as a person who listens to podcasts, I really like these little tangents whenever I hear other podcasts do
It's
them.
staying. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm just saying that, like, even if you don't do it, like, maybe at the end of your bloopers, maybe take the best ones.
No, wouldn't that be amazing? But, yeah, so Felicity, you should talk a little bit about Hitchcock's fascination with, because, I mean, you brought this up right before the podcast, which I thought was really interesting because I never thought about it like this. But Hitchcock really likes women that steal from their employers.
I just don't get it. So, like, in Psycho, I don't remember what not Vivian Lee. Janet Lee.
Oh, it's like Vivian Lee.
Not Vivian Lee. I don't understand because Janet Lee's Jamie Lee Curtis's.
I need that remake.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis's mother, Janet Lee. Dear Lord. Well, like at the beginning of Psycho, in order to be able to run away with her boyfriend, she steals this money from her employer so that way he could pay off like his alimony debts in his like nasty divorce. But like at the beginning of like Marnie, like she steals a lot of money from her employer and like she takes it from his safe and just like flees. And I don't really like understand like why.
Yeah.
Like, what is his obsession with, like, female thieves?
I think almost in this time period it makes sense because it seems like the most... I feel like for the time period it was a progressive way to show women, you know, like, sticking out against the man, I suppose. And I think that's the most overt way to do that in film.
Well, he also did that, too, because, like, in his Alfred Hitchcock Presents... There's this one episode where he was making the wife the abusive alcoholic instead of the husband, and that was like an overt way of saying like it goes the other direction. It's just not like abusive alcoholic husbands either.
That's fair.
And also, there's this. So back in the day, there was this like mentality where if you were murdered, you deserved it. You had done something to deserve it.
Oh.
So he did this.
Love that.
He did this whole episode, like, so if you were a murdered woman, you must have been slutting around. That's kind of like the
Ew.
that was kind of like the.
Those are my two goals in life: to
to
slut
slut
around
around.
and be murdered.
But that was like the perception.
You just straight up want to be a Jack the Ripper victim?
Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry. That probably sounds so bad.
So-
I gave a toast to that statement. You can't see it on the podcast.
Well, since Jack the Ripper was a woman, this kind of like makes sense.
Get the
Anyway,
get out of my. Jack the Ripper was not a woman.
Have you not
Hashtag
played,
not my Jack the Ripper.
Have you not played Fate Stay Night?
Oh my god, right? Oh my god.
but like,
Gotta go.
and so another thing too is he actually tried to like disprove that if you were a woman who was murdered, you were clearly like slutting around town by like making an episode dedicated to this poor woman. She's alone. She lives alone, and she's in her apartment, and she's terrified because of this murderer who's been murdering people in her apartment complex. Well, she actually does become a victim,
Oof.
and like she does fall into that category.
That's not good.
Well, sadly, because of her neighbors, she does fall into that category of like, well, she must have been like messing around with him, and that's why she was one of the ones who was murdered.
Oh my god.
But here's the thing: is like what he did really well is that we saw her story.
Yeah,
Who cares what the neighbor said? We saw her story, which
Yeah.
we saw that it was not true.
that's 100% true.
So
Yeah.
he did try. He tried for his time to like be a little bit progressive, except for himself as a man was just not.
And so let's go ahead and go into that because I think that's a huge part of the discussion in Marnie. So we're just going to go ahead and jump to that because this is a good segue for it. But all the stuff Tippi Hedren went through. Now, it's cited that I think it's interesting. It's an interesting case because I think Tippi Hedren is the only woman, as far as I know, who's come out against Hitchcock like this. A lot of the other women and a lot of the other femme fatales, like Grace Kelly, et cetera, have came out like not necessarily in defense of him, but like I don't know, we never experienced this. It was actually pretty
Yeah.
progressive because they weren't like we don't believe Tippi Hedren. They were just kind of like we just didn't have this experience with Hitchcock, you know. So what happened was Hitchcock came on to Tippi Hedren, and Tippi Hedren rejected his advances. So he kind of just acted out on set and just became like really unbearable. He wouldn't let people talk to her on set. He wouldn't let people interact with her unless they had to. He was very like overtly like really critical of her, and it was almost to kind of compare it was kind of the same relationship Shelley Duvall and Kubrick had, only with the like sexual nature built into it, because I don't think Kubrick ever came on to Shelley Duvall. He was just kind of really abusive towards her. But with Hitchcock, it was that same relationship Kubrick had to Shelley Duvall, just there was also the element of wanting a sexual relationship.
Are we also going to talk about the doll?
Yeah. Oh my god, I did not know about the doll.
You didn't-
Felicity, go for it.
Okay, so apparently years later, he sent Tippi Hedren's daughter a doll that looked exactly like Tippi
Ew,
for a birthday present.
that's gross.
As a way to like creep them out.
That's weird. But
And it was supposed to be an apology too of some sorts, I guess, but
yeah, and I'd love for you, Felicity, because you were talking about this earlier. Talk about Tippi Hedren's like discussion about this, because I've heard this. A lot of film scholars have talked about it, like, and talked about this particular controversy with Hitchcock, and they kind of discuss it in terms of, you know, Hitchcock was around all of these women, and for some of them, I guess, you know, this is what I've heard. He didn't see like a woman like Grace Kelly, you know, as reachable.
well, also he
But-
just wouldn't dare, not with her.
That's true. He wouldn't dare with some of these other women, but Tippi Hedren, for whatever reason, he decided to go after her in that way. And it's kind of like, you know, you see a lot of controversy with people. Like, I just think in particular, an example that's relevant is Marcus Hyde. He's Kim Kardashian and Ariana Grande's personal photographers. It just came out that he's very predatory and abusive towards women who aren't as successful or aren't as in the public eye. So I don't know if it was the same situation with Hitchcock where, you know, he knew where he couldn't take advantage of women, but he tried in other ways, you know. But go ahead, Felicity, go into Tippi Hedren.
Well, the thing about him like preying upon women who had less power, he also was preying upon Tippi because she saw him as a mentor figure. This was the one man in her life that she actually thought believed in her,
Yeah.
and that she was going to make it because of him, and that she was going to become this big star, and he was going to teach her and show her the ropes.
Yeah.
And she discussed, because there's an interview where she talks about this. It was like a document interview, so it was not like a link that we could just like show on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
But she was discussing how years later, when she actually thought about it, she realized that she thought of Hitchcock as being two separate people. The mentor who was trying to help her cultivate her career, and then the predator who came after her and abused her.
Yeah.
And she cannot, like, think of them as the same person. She has to see them separately, because in her mind, she does not understand how a man was so loving and so kind and nice to her became this monster to her and destroyed her career. And that's another thing, too.
It's true. He got her blacklisted.
Well, she made it perfectly clear that she said, to quote her in her interview, she said, "He ruined my career, but not my life."
Yeah.
Because she just had a different life. It was not the life that she wanted or that she was expecting, but she did not feel like she ultimately had a bad life.
Yeah, and for the people out there who are like, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, who knows, speculation, he did get her blacklisted. Like, that is a fact. Like, he sent letters to producers. He actually finagled schedule things, and he sent letters as her representation to get her to not get gigs. And it was like, yeah, I was really fucking messed up.
And unfortunately, like, this is Alfred Hitchcock you're getting a letter from. Why wouldn't you believe him? Especially as, like, a big producer or director at the time.
Right, 100%. Well, no, he was pretending to be her representation. He wasn't even writing.
He was pretending?
Yeah, no, he wasn't even writing as Hitchcock.
Oh my
Yeah, it was fucked. It was, but that's what makes Marnie very interesting to me, because it's weird to me to see a male filmmaker act out in this way, in a misogynist way, but to try and show the horrors of misogyny in his films. And that's something that's very strange about Marnie, because you have this very hyper-feminist lens on the actual narrative, but then under the guise of that, or outside of that, you have this male director acting out. It's kind of like watching Roman Polanski, where he goes from a victim all of his life, mother got sent to a concentration camp, wife gets murdered, et cetera, but then somehow he just turns into he raped someone, but then he turns into a perpetrator, and tracking that through his films is it's so weird. You know what I mean? Because it makes you look through his films in a different type of lens,
There was also this rumor going around, and keep in mind it was kind of a rumor that he was, like, becoming impotent during this time, and he was taking out, like, that dysfunction out on Tippy, because she just so happened to be the weakest woman in the room, too.
Oh, that's so sad.
Because, and again, this is a rumor.
Yeah.
I do not know this for sure, that he actually was becoming impotent.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not chiming in here just because I actually hadn't heard a lot of this. So this is, like, I knew they'd had, like, issues, but I didn't know the whole, like background as to what started this. So that's, if you're wondering why I'm not contributing here.
Oh, no, we didn't mean to have you kill your darling right now, Evelyn.
Yeah, no, I just...
It's an interesting thing to discuss, because, you have these proto-feminist filmmakers, because, I felt empowered by the women in Hitchcock's film. I'm sure other women have. But knowing this, it makes you look at things in a little bit of a different light.
It's my relationship with Joss Whedon.
Oh, my God.
See, like...
Oh, my God.
Well, Reed, as a woman filmmaker, and as someone who was also inspired by the women in his films, I kind of feel a little bit the same way as Tippy. I kind of do have to separate the two a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of hard, like, watching some of his films, realizing what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah,
too.
and it's horrible, and it's not okay at all. It's not all right, and it definitely, like, we're not saying that it enhances the film experience, rather it makes you relook at it in a completely different light.
Film is a great place to look for people to learn from. It's a terrible place to look for heroes.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yes.
That's a great way to put it, Evelyn.
Just art in general.
Straight up, kill your darlings right now.
Also,
Everyone's
sports,
terrible.
politics, pretty much any place that you look for notable people is a terrible place to look for heroes.
Straight
Because there's a reason they made it.
Yeah,
Just
100%.
saying.
And so it's so interesting. But anyway, going into the narrative of Marnie, it deals very strongly in, women, what women experience, et cetera, and it does it in a very open way. Like, Marnie is raped during the film by Sean Connery, and she's forced into a marriage with Sean Connery. Like, all this stuff is happening, and she's being manipulated in the film in the same way. And I know a lot of people try and argue that Tippi Hedren's relationship with Hitchcock was just in order to enhance her performance. I don't think so. I 100% don't believe that, but it brings an interesting lens to the film. But the one psychological thing that I wanted to talk about is the whole idea of the mother figure and kind of the Freudian element of it, because Marnie's mother is a very prominent figure throughout, and it's very interesting because usually in Hitchcock films you see the son-mother relationship. You see that in Notorious, you see that in Psycho, you see that in other Hitchcock films that I'm not thinking of right now.
Man Who Knew Too Much.
Man Who Knew Too Much, yeah, 100%. And it's the mother and the son who have the relationship. But in Marnie, it's the relationship between Marnie and her own mother, because, it's still a studio film. It's not, Hitchcock isn't able to as overtly deal with things. But the way it showcases trauma is very fascinating to me, because it's a very honest depiction of trauma. Marnie, it's implied, and it's one of Bruce Dern's first roles, actually. Yeah, and he plays like Marnie. I don't know if I'm not remembering if he's Marnie's father or if he's just like the man who his mom is with, because her mom was a prostitute. And this is all implied. This is all like implied things, by the way, because studio system, Hollywood, you couldn't just be like, her mom's a prostitute, she was raped as a child, blah, blah, blah. But she was all those things, and that led her to foster this relationship with the woman she is. So she came out of that trauma not trusting people, not trusting the world around her, and that's why that's why she takes on all of these other personas, and that's why she goes along, and that she sends all the money she steals to her mom, and it's super interesting.
The credits just say the sailor from Marnie's childhood.
Yeah,
so
okay.
It's not even really specific.
Yeah, the sailor from Marnie's childhood. Oh my god.
I know.
I gotta go.
I love you, IMDb.
IMDb. But anyway, yeah. Do you guys want to say something about that?
But sailors?
But not about sailors. Not about sailors. About like just the trauma in the film, because it created such a traumatic experience for Tippi Hedren that I think it's interesting that it's creating trauma in the real world, but the film itself is such an honest depiction of how awful creating trauma is. It's so weird.
I actually I'm not gonna tell the story here, so you could probably cut this part out, but this movie kind of does traumatize me because I have like a weird relationship with my own mother.
Do you want me to cut this out, or do you want me to keep this in? I can keep this in.
You can do whatever you want.
I'm keeping it in.
Okay. So my mother had an interesting life growing up, because she grew up in like a hardcore conservative church-going home. Like, they weren't even allowed to watch like TV. They weren't allowed to go to like dances. Everything was just of the devil. Mm-hmm. And
love that.
and so my mother did not want children. She actually like kind of like had me almost as a power move. Oh. With her sister, just so you
love
know.
that.
The fact that you were born as a power move says a lot about your personality.
Says a lot about who you are. I was an accident.
The thing that there's one fight in particular where I actually don't remember what the fight was about, but my mother said the absolute creepiest thing a person can ever say to any other human being in the world, which was, nobody will ever love you as much as I do because you came from my body. And
my vagina just cringed.
And so
Me too,
whenever I watch,
oh my god.
So whenever
your mind vagina.
So whenever I watch Marnie, I think about that fight and how creepy it is, because my mother does. Well, she did. She does not anymore. She's a completely different, better person now because she's worked through her own issues. But my mother had this weird, creepy ownership of her daughters, growing up. It was not just a parent-child relationship. It was an I own you relationship.
And that's super interesting too, because my mom was a lot of the same way, and it's very interesting because not. It's interesting because those kinds of relationships, Marnie, it feels very honest, and I love it so much, despite all the horrible stuff, because it's an honest depiction of how I view toxic relationships, because it is an ownership thing. It's you know, there's a Marnie's mother fosters a relationship based on shame around who Marnie is and things that have happened to her that are not her fault. And she uses that to take advantage of her, to manipulate her, to, you know, be in control of her, because she feels like she's somehow entitled to Marnie and she owns her. For this relationship, it's because they're family, you know, and for, you know, Hitchcock, it was because he was giving her a career or whatever he wanted to say. For Sean Connery's character, it was because he knew her secrets or whatever.
Well, she stole from
She
him.
stole from him, yeah. So it's just Marnie, the way Marnie is shown ownership, or the way Marnie is like kind of like forced around to others. It's just so like, it's just so honest, you know? And so I see a lot of my own trauma in it, which is like, then to get into the Roman Polanski thing, but Rosemary's Baby is so important to me because, you know, what Rosemary goes through, like, I can't sit through the rape scene because it was so similar to a sexual assault I experienced. Like, the way people interact with Rosemary the entire time was how people react in my own life. And so it's such a, I could relate to the trauma so well, but the male filmmaker behind it, not during Rosemary's Baby, but eventually becomes a perpetrator of that kind of trauma that they're speaking out against, you know?
It is a strange. And
It's
like,
such a weird relationship.
well, because like one more quick story about.
Oh my God!
mother.
Tell a long story.
Well, like another thing too is like my mother would also try to justify her actions by telling me that I have no right to feel the way I feel because I was not being sexually abused.
Oh my
And,
God!
Yeah, like I said, things are a lot better now. Things have changed.
For those of you
but
out
it's
there,
weird.
you do have a right to feel the way you feel, whether it of regard to any kind of abuse. Evelyn,
Yes.
your turn.
My relationship with my mom's pretty good, so
That's
I'm not like
so good.
you know.
That's good. But yeah, and I also feel, you know, it's hard to say this for me, but I do think Marnie is Hitchcock's most underrated film. It actually wasn't a film that was taken seriously until very, very recently. And actually, I think it's interesting, very recently there was a bunch of high fashion campaigns for the spring season that were referencing Marnie. And I was like, all right.
Why are we doing this? No,
Right? Yeah, no, I'm forgetting the brand. I want to say it was, I don't even know what brand. But they had like the whole yellow purse, the opening sequence. They went through the whole opening sequence and it was a lady like changing her appearance in a hotel room. It was crazy. I was like, okay, Marnie, come through. But I do think it is an underrated Hitchcock film. But what this kind of represented for Hitchcock's career was Marnie was not only Hitchcock's transition out of studio filmmaking, because the studio system kind of collapsed around the time Marnie was made. When was Marnie made? What year was it exactly?
It was 1964.
Yeah, so it's like less than 10 years away from the entire collapse, because that was 70 something?
Yeah.
70. What year was Bonnie and Clyde? 72?
67.
Oh my God, 67. Oh my God. Okay. So Marnie is coming out at the time the studio system is collapsing. It's 64, like you guys just looked up.
The year of the
For me.
virtuous mission.
And then it's, 64, it's 3 years away from 67 when the studio system fully collapsed. So Marnie, it's difficult for Hitchcock because Hitchcock is so rooted in studio system, but he's trying to break away from the studio system with the kind of stories he's wanting to tell. Yeah. But the studio system as a whole is collapsing. So Marnie just is like, it's at a bad time.
Well, he was actually somewhat ahead of his time too, because he had to buy Psycho back from the studio because they weren't going to distribute it because apparently it was too graphic. But I understand it's like 1960.
Yeah.
So it's 1960. We should make fun of him. But
which is ironic that he's ahead of his time because he's such a studio filmmaker, you know?
Let me put it this way. He was a studio filmmaker. He liked studio backing, but I think he kind of, because he couldn't make it in England. Oh
my God, wait, really quick. You make a good point. What we mean by Hitchcock is a studio filmmaker. We talked about this all the first week and all the second week, but we never really defined that. Studio system control, the control Hitchcock could have over his narratives in a studio system was so strong. And we don't necessarily mean narrative control, because Hitchcock always fought about his narratives with the studio system. We mean, there's budgets, there's sets, there's et cetera, you can cultivate a film experience and be in control of every single little element of it under a studio system. Because, the studio system all of the sets are indoors. All of the sets are on sound stages. You have control of everything in a way you really don't have now. You know. But yeah, that's what we mean by studio system. It's just kind of like a hyper control thing. And Hitchcock, that relationship to control is super, like, something he really needs for his films because.
Which, in the context of this whole Tippi Hedren thing, is very interesting to talk about.
Yeah, no, 100%, because he needed to control Tippi Hedren the same way he needed to control movies, because
Everything else.
it's just a lot. But yeah, talk about him in England.
Well, he really couldn't make it in England because he was too progressive for England.
Well, Ellen and I talked about this in The
so-
Lodger, how he got into a huge fight about Ivor Novello and trying to, which he would later get into with Cary Grant, but that's like, but England, he jumped ship from England super fast when he got a studio contract with Selznick, right?
Yeah. So, when what's-his-face Selznick saw, like, the talent that Alfred Hitchcock could be if he had studio backing, which he was just flat out not getting. Plus, this is a whole other video that we should do one time of just, like, how screwed up the British cinema was during that time.
Oh, I don't know a lot about British cinema, so that's going to be a Felicity episode.
It is going to be Felicity because it's about women in war, so we could
Oh.
do women in war film. Okay, anyway, so he jumped ship really fast because he needed that studio backing, and he just was not getting it. He was too progressive for England. Plus, they were having their issues over in England with their British cinema, which is a whole other story.
Yeah.
And when
Oh yeah.
And so, like, when he came over to America and became really popular here, he also found himself needing to circumvent the American, like, Hays codes and laws that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always been like, I'm going to fight you and I'm going to get the movie that I want. But he also had to, like, figure out ways to circumvent it too, because, like, the scene in Psycho where in the beginning where Janet Leigh is, yes, it is Janet Leigh. So Janet Leigh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to look at you like it. I gave Felicity a look like no, it's not. But I didn't mean for it to be.
I messed up who it was earlier. So Janet Leigh. Well, like, she's just in, like, her bra and her slip.
When Doris Day at the beginning of Psycho was in a broad her slip. Could you imagine if it was Doris Day?
Day would be caught dead.
Also, real talk. Okay.
Angela Lansbury in Psycho.
Oh my God!
What if
Liberace?
Universes. Yes.
That would be horrible. But if you
I've
guys
seen
aren't
a young
following,
Angela Lansbury. It's great.
oh my God, really? If you guys don't follow our Instagram, you should, because I marketed our Director Horror Stories podcast with that sequence in Psycho where she's driving and it's like,
Well, like, okay, so for example, like, so Janet Leigh in the beginning of Psycho, she's just nothing but her slip and her bra. But, like, she's having a serious conversation with her boyfriend in the scene. So they could not cut that scene out, or else the whole movie would make no sense.
Yeah.
And that's what he would have to do to circumvent the system.
Yeah.
So he's always
And
wanted
he's very good at that.
And so he's always wanted to tell stories that Hollywood would never endorse, and clearly England would never endorse either.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, leading up to the collapse of the system, he got so used to circumventing it that he almost needed that system continuously. Also, here's another thing too that people don't realize about Psycho. Psycho was pretty much an independent film.
Yeah.
Because they fought him so hard on everything that he had to fund everything himself, and he actually had to buy his own movie back. It's a mess.
It's a hot ass mess, but Alfred August is about the underrated Hitchcock. No, I'm just kidding. Because if I hear one more person say, Vertigo is my favorite film of all time, the best film ever made, I'm gonna lose it.
I think I've heard you say that in this series. Like,
I'm so sorry for everyone in my life who has to hear me bitch about Vertigo all the time. And I also, let me just go on the record. It's not that I don't like Vertigo. I like Vertigo a lot. I just hate the people who like Vertigo. But, yeah, before we leave Marnie, I just want to say, and then it's very interesting, too, because Marnie, in terms of the whole, like, woman, blah, 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 women being victimized by society, the one thing she loves is her poor horse, and then, she has to shoot it dead. Because she has a horse accident. She has a horse accident. I'm such a good podcast host. Marnie has a horse accident.
I'm not saying that, like, women can feel nothing for horses, but, like, the fact that it's a
Marnie
horse...
was a horse girl.
Oh my
God.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying, like, the horse is almost like, because it is a very masculine symbol all through... Oh dear lord.
My Hitchcock is attacking me for not
The
liking
ghost of
The
Vertigo.
ghost of Hitchcock.
He's like,
Aaron and Mr. Chicken, I'm sorry.
I hate that. I'm gonna go, Erynn and Mr. Chicken.
With Don
Oh my god. I would be haunted by Don Knox.
Yes.
That's my life.
Mr. Limpet.
I actually had a huge crush on him when I was a little kid.
I did too. I wanted to be a fish so
I
bad.
loved him. No, I didn't want to be a fish. He was in my Scooby-Doo game, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights, and he just kind of sat there and heckled Scooby-Doo. And I was like, I like him.
See, I've never wanted to be human, so like I've always wanted to be like some kind of like non-human entity.
I just realized we're talking about Don Knotts on a Marnie podcast.
Don Knotts was in Marnie, don't you remember?
We're gonna cut this out.
The famous Don Knotts, he was the horse.
He was Sean Connery.
He was Sean Connery.
Sean Connery just takes off a Scooby-Doo mask and it's Don Knotts.
I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you blasted kids.
This is such an abstract joke that everyone is probably listening to and like, what? Oh my god.
Okay, so back to what I was saying, like, I do find, like, the horse killing scene really interesting because, like, all throughout history, horses have always been, like, a very masculine symbol. Like, for weird example, in ancient Rome, if you kidnapped a woman, like someone's wife or someone's daughter, someone's female entity in their life, you had to pay a fine if you were caught. That was okay. But, like, if you stole that same man's horse, you got the death penalty. Horses were serious business, and they were a man's thing. I'm not even lying. It's really funny. So,
I'm gonna
like
take
thinking
my
about
horse to the old town.
oh dear God,
I'm sorry.
no. So thinking about like her like killing the horse is almost killing like the male symbol.
It's also
is what I'm
interesting too
getting
because
at.
Marnie is so hyper masculine the entire movie.
Yeah.
That killing the horse symbol is almost I think at the end of the movie she steps into her femininity in a lot of ways, and I think the horse imagery is kind of like getting the ball rolling on that by the end of the movie. At the end of the movie, it almost feels like Day of the Locust, where like everything is ruined and everything's effed up, but like I don't know why I censored myself for that F bomb.
It's hacked up.
Oh my god! But Marnie comes out of it completely unscathed, and it's a really interesting commentary on women because it's like women can go through all of this terrible stuff, but somehow they still make it out.
It's almost like a rarity too in his films.
Yeah.
Like she pretty much did come out unscathed.
Yeah.
Where,
Well,
like,
not unscathed, I guess. She came out
but
still strong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where like a lot of women in this film do get punished in some way and just have to live with it, whereas she comes into the movie having already been punished by society for just existing as a woman. So it makes sense for the movie to end with her going, there's nothing wrong. I'm a woman.
I'm leaving. Yeah.
I'm leaving. Everything's fine.
Yeah. And then there wasn't a Doll's House 2 written where she comes back.
Ew. Ew.
Sorry, I was just dragging. I don't know why I brought Ibsen into this.
Why?
This is getting very abstract. Evelyn, what were you gonna say?
I don't even. This is like one of my hits bong galaxy brain kind of tangents, but something in Hitchcock movies is he always talks about, or he always.
It's bong. I thought you said hitch bong. I was like, I don't know what that is. Can I have a hit?
I got really excited when she said hit spawn because I'm just like,
It's bong. I love this. Okay, Evelyn, you hit the bong and then.
In all Hitchcock movies, it always comes back to some form of transportation, whether it's like the highway in Psycho. There's always trains, highways, planes, boats, whatever.
Merry-go-rounds.
trains, planes, and automobiles.
But like kind of looking at, because the horse has always been like a transportative. I don't know if that's a word. It is now.
Transportation.
Like a form of transportation, and so like Marnie having to kill that.
I love this.
Marnie is the one film I'm like really foggy on, so I don't want to.
No, this is an intellectual thought. Keep
attribute
going.
anything to it that's not there. But
I'm cutting that out.
Her having to kill that horse is interesting because it's I don't remember this scene, so I'm just trying like a situation that she's put in by other people, and like having to kill that almost that symbol of autonomy and progress that belongs to her because other people are making her do it is kind of interesting too in the context of everything.
Yeah, I love that.
I really like that because we kind of do like see like cars and like means of being able to travel as a symbol of freedom. So you're right. I love that. I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I wish we had Robert here so he could talk about the vaginal symbol that is Marnie walking through the train station with her purse. Just so you know, I love Robert.
The
And
handbag is totally snatched.
R.I.P. headphone. For those of you listening, Evelyn just laid down on the ground. Snatch, sis.
I'm not gonna lie, I love vagina symbols in movies.
Me too.
Because they're just great. Like, you can cut this out, but I just have to like tell people about this. My favorite thing ever was when we were, my sister and I, we were strong-armed into seeing like one of those awful Transformer movies.
I thought you were gonna say we were strong-armed into looking at a vagina.
Well,
I thought you were saying one of those awful trans people. I'm like, I've known a few of this.
Oh my god!
oh my god! Those Transformers movies. Like, there was a legit vagina monster on one of those.
That's hot.
On one of the spaceships, and my sister and I looked at each other and were like, did we just see a vagina?
Is that a vagina? But thank you guys so much for joining us. That was Marnie. Marnie is a really good film, and you should watch it, even though Hitchcock was an asshole during it.
Yeah.
I concur.
Appreciate the art, not the artist.
Yeah. So we will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Where can they find you?
Oh, crack. You can find me on my YouTube channel called Victoriana Gray, Gray with an A, and my Instagram, Victoriana Gray, also Gray with an A.
Yes. Evelyn?
Find me on my YouTube channel, EV Override, EVIE Override. My Instagram, EV Override, and my YouTube and Instagram, Cineborg Productions.
Yay!
Yes. Okay, bye.